Daemon's reflection ability is one of the most unique and powerful defense mechanisms in fiction, as it reflects any physical intent or malicious thoughts directed toward him. But how does this ability fare against the Bleach universe? Can anyone actually harm this little child? Absolutely, and today we're going to go over every character that can outright bypass reflection or circumvent its conditions. I am your host Ab-stract, and this is the Ab-stract section. Before we get started, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Now, I did a whole video on Daemon's abilities, so if you're not familiar with him, definitely check that out. But to quickly summarize, Daemon has the ability to reflect all things physically intended or directed at him. So no physical attacks, firearms, weapons, or launched attacks. Basically, if it is intended for Daemon and is of a physical nature, it will not work. Now, there's another part of Daemon's ability that has to do with malicious thought being reflected, but that's a case-by-case scenario and one you would have to prove. So I'll not be factoring that in unless it's pertinent to the character. Moving on, there are 4 ways that I have found to bypass Daemon's reflection, and mind you, this only applies to the Daemon we've currently seen so far. If things change, we'll handle it accordingly. Now, the ways to bypass reflection are as follows: indirect attacks, non-physical interaction, abstract or conceptual effects, and exploiting real-time limitations. Now, every character I will name can exploit some facet of this criteria to breach Daemon's reflection. Let's get started. Coming in at number 1, we have the Captain Commander, Shunsui Senjumaru. Now, Shunsui's path to victory lies in his Bankai. His Bankai works like a 4-act play. It sets the stage and has its participants follow the play out until either of the participants die. Now, how would this bypass reflection? Well, number 1, because Shunsui's Bankai works autonomously and doesn't require Shunsui himself to attack or engage Daemon at all. The Bankai simply takes each participant through the stages of the play. Number 2, everything aside from the threat of spiritual pressure is a non-physical attack, which Daemon has not shown he can reflect. So whatever damage Shunsui may have accrued throughout the fight would transfer to Daemon. Then Daemon would be afflicted with a terrible disease following the play's storyline, and lastly, he would be drowned until he gave out. As I said, the only ability that would be reflected would be the Reishi cutting thread, because that, of course, is a physical attack. At number 2, we have Shinji Hirako in his Zanpakuto Sakanade. Shinji releasing Sakanade would cause a gaseous substance to cover the entire battlefield and introduce Daemon to the inverted world. This ability is not a direct attack, nor does it need to be aimed or targeted at any specific person. Shinji would simply start spinning his sword and have Daemon thinking he was on cloud 9. Saying this wouldn't work would be the equivalent of saying the hidden miss jutsu couldn't be performed in Daemon's presence. Although this ability cannot be used to harm Daemon, it satisfies the conditions for bypassing reflection. Taking our number 3 spot, we have our guy Asnot. Asnot's path to victory lies in his holy form Tatar Farus. Once in this state, simply observing him will cause the fear ability to take effect, and if his fear could kill in its base form, there's no reason to believe his Volshndish would be any less potent. This ability in no way physically attacks Daemon or directs anything at him at all, and it would be on you to argue killing intent. Again, the fear is not a projected attack, but a consequence of Daemon's own actions, which would be looking at as not. There's also an argument that the fear would override Daemon's confidence and potentially disrupt his ability to maintain his power. So Asnot clears and bypassing reflection due to his ability being one you bring upon yourself. Our 4th seed is Gremmy in his ability The Visionary. Now, this gives him limitless potential as far as ways to defeat Daemon, but there's a lot of ways this could go. For one, Gremmy could imagine Daemon dead like he did with Guan Li, and in turn, Gremmy would be killed, thus ending the fight. In fact, for this battle, Gremmy couldn't imagine anything happening to Daemon, or else it would be reflected. So turning his bones to cookies, noodles, or whatever would not work. Gremmy's best bet would be to cause some form of large-scale environmental damage. That way, Daemon's ability wouldn't kick in because nothing is targeting or being intended for him. He could say, for instance, without having Daemon in mind, turn the entire battlefield into lava, and this would cause problems for Daemon, of course, because he can't fly. Or imagine if it rained acid and that he would not be affected by this. So can Gremmy defeat Daemon? Yes, but it would go a number of ways, with most of the scenarios ending in Daemon's favor. On to number 5, Genryosei Yamamoto. Now, you might think Yamamoto would struggle at first, but once we break it down, it becomes clear Daemon wouldn't stand a chance. Yamamoto rarely goes all out against weaker opponents, as seen in his fight with the Trade Bestia, where he only left him with burns, and with Nanao, whom he didn't immediately soul crush. Against Aion, he even held back, initially noting his punishment was enough before one-shotting him. Similarly, against Daemon, Yamamoto would start with incapacitating moves rather than lethal force due to Daemon's childlike appearance. As the fight progresses and Yamamoto's attacks are reflected, he'd quickly deduce the nature of Daemon's ability, realizing that any attack he launches gets turned back on him. Once he understands this, Yamamoto would likely activate his Bankai, Zanka no Tachi, and rely on the passive heat and energy emitted in his sun armor form to defeat him. This approach circumvents Daemon's reflection ability because it doesn't involve direct intent or physical targeting. Yamamoto would simply exist and the overwhelming heat would incinerate Daemon without a traditional attack being launched. So unless clarified otherwise, passive destruction should bypass Daemon's reflection entirely. Coming in at number 6, we have the GOAT himself, Sosuke Aizen. Much like Asnot's fear ability, Kyoka Suigetsu can't be reflected because it requires the opponent seeing Aizen, and there's no intent directed at Daemon when releasing Kyoka Suigetsu. Also, after rereading the manga, I realized Kyoka Suigetsu has something of an auto function where it generates illusions tailor-made to the victim's mind. For example, Aizen has never seen Renji nor Ichigo's new Bankai, but Yhwach has, and under the effects of Kyoka Suigetsu, he clearly saw them in their new forms. This means Kyoka Suigetsu is producing what your mind has pictured certain things to look like and how certain events would play out. Kyoka Suigetsu could make Aizen appear as Ada, and Daemon, being fooled by this, would attempt to touch him and then get destroyed by Aizen's Reiatsu. And as we've seen, Daemon can interact and be interacted with by other people. Our 7th candidate is Senjumaru Shutara. Like Shunsui, Senjumaru's Bankai would get the win for her. Its first phase is pretty much tailor-made to deal with whoever's inside of it, so I'm more than certain it could come up with something creative to get around physically attacking Daemon, like with what happened with Pernaida. The Bankai could just fill the room he's trapped in with water or sand to drown or suffocate him, or something to that effect. We've also seen the Bankai perform non-physical attacks, like in the case when Uryu was defeated. So, being trapped within her Bankai would allow it to come up with a scenario that specifically counters his strengths. On to the next one. Coming in at number 8, we got my guy Askin Naklavar, a true menace of the Bleach verse, might I add. Askin's Shrift D to Deathdealing is an extremely overpowered ability and one that has everything it needs to bypass reflection. It allows him to control the lethal dosage of a particular substance he ingests within his body. To start off, Askin has an ability called Gift Bad. This allows him to designate a spot that if anyone enters will have their resistance to something of his choosing lowered. And the cool thing about this particular ability is that he doesn't need to consume anything to designate what the lethal substance would be. So he could designate blood to be lethal, oxygen, or if he was exposed to Daemon's chakra itself. Gift Bad gets around reflection by having no intent towards Daemon at all. Askin simply designates a spot, and if you happen to be in said spot, you are now paralyzed by whatever Askin deems poisonous. Then we move on to Askin's main ability, the Death Dealing, which allows him to control the lethal dosage of a substance he takes into his body. So, if Askin were to shoot at Daemon with a Hylic Vial, it would get reflected and hit Askin, causing him to bleed. Then Askin could drink that blood and deem blood a lethal substance to Daemon. Again, this isn't a direct attack towards Daemon, nothing is being launched or fired, and there's no malicious intent, and by that I mean active thoughts of doing harm to him. So the Death Dealing gets an A in this regard as well. Lastly, Askin can make a Gift Ball Deluxe, which covers a massive area. Within this area, Askin can use a combination of the Death Dealing and his Gift Bad, where he can raise and lower the lethal dosage of multiple substances at the same time, and he doesn't have to consume the substance to do so. For this, Askin could deem blood, oxygen, chakra, water, hydrogen, pretty much anything he wants to be poisonous, and there wouldn't be a thing that Daemon could do about it. Gift Ball Deluxe is not an attack itself. It simply closes off the area and Askin gets to set the rules for what is lethal in that area. So Askin clears with this as well. Full marks, good job Askin. Our 9th contestant is the Stern Ritter Grandmaster, Yhwach. Yhwach can bypass reflection by Balance's ability to manipulate probability and causality. The best example to use is Song Du. After failing to kill Song Du due to his Shifty Iron, that good fortune is noted and stored on the scales of fortune and misfortune. When Hashwell goes to attack him again, the scales have now tipped in Hashwell's favor, allowing him to completely carve Song Du while using his Shrift, the Iron. Just like with the Gojo video, I believe a similar outcome would occur for Daemon. Yhwach goes to attack Daemon, but is attacked by his own attack. Then the scales store Daemon's good fortune of not being attacked and utilize all that good fortune as misfortune to completely bypass Daemon's reflection, thus allowing Yhwach to attack him. Another way the Balance could bypass reflection is by dishing out damage in the form of misfortune. As seen in his fight with Uryu, Yhwach can channel misfortune directly into an attack and give that misfortune to a person. And as I said, Daemon has not shown the ability to reflect non-physical attacks, and this would count as that because there's no medium between Hashball attacking and Daemon receiving damage. At number 10, we have His Majesty's successor, Ishida Uryu. And I know this is one you've all been waiting for, so let's get into it. We all know the only viable way Uryu could bypass Daemon's reflection ability is with his own ability, the Antithesis. This has been a subject of debate for a while now. Most people seem to believe one of two things. Either Daemon completely overwhelms Uryu and reflects Antithesis outright, or they'd essentially play hot potato, passing damage back and forth endlessly. Well, I have a unique perspective on this, and I'd like to share it with you all. As we discussed, Daemon's ability comes down to intent, specifically intent directed toward him. If you intend something for Daemon, that intent is reflected back on you. Simple as that. During his battle with Hashwalt, Uryu acted as a glorified punching bag, taking all of Hashwalt's attacks while dealing no visible damage. As Hashwalt is about to leave, thinking he utterly defeated Uryu thinks it's the perfect moment to reveal his shrift. Upon activating his shrift, Hashwalt suddenly took all the damage Uryu had suffered during their battle. Uryu explains his ability the Antithesis allows him to choose 2 points and reverse the events that have occurred between them entirely. In this instance, Uryu reversed the wounds he and Hashwalt had received. Breaking it down, here's why this is one of the most broken abilities in Bleach. Uryu can essentially rewrite history. You hit him with your Bankai? Nope. You hit yourself with your Bankai. You inflicted massive damage on him throughout the fight? Actually, you really just hurt yourself instead. The key to Antithesis is that it doesn't really rely on targeting the opponent directly. It targets past events. It manipulates outcomes that have already happened. Unless you possess an ability like Tsukishima's past manipulation, there's no real way to counter this, and that brings us back to Daemon. Uryu doesn't have to direct any intent at Daemon for Antithesis to work. His ability operates retroactively by altering the past rather than targeting the present. And to my knowledge, Daemon cannot reflect events that have already happened. His reflection works in real time, responding to intent and action. For example, imagine Uryu fires an arrow at Daemon. Before the arrow reaches him, Uryu is struck by his own attack due to Daemon's reflection, leaving a hole in his body. Here's where Antithesis comes in. Point A is when Uryu fires the arrow. Point B is when Uryu gets hit by his own reflected attack. Everything that happened between these 2 points can be reversed at Uryu's discretion. He doesn't target Daemon directly, he simply reversed the events within point A and point B. As a result, Daemon would end up getting hit by the arrow instead of Uryu. So unless Daemon's ability has some hidden facet that allows him to counter retroactive causality manipulation, Uryu's Antithesis should bypass Daemon's reflection entirely, with the only real limitation being whether Uryu can survive the initial reflection long enough to activate the ability. So what do you guys think? Could Antithesis counter Daemon's reflection, or am I reaching here? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Next we have Yhwach. Yhwach versus Daemon would go much like Uryu versus Daemon, where Uryu would be attacking Daemon retroactively with past events. Yhwach can literally attack in the future, and as we've discussed, Daemon's ability so far only works in real time. Also, Yhwach literally negates any ability he can see with the Almighty, as shown when he fully negated Ichibe's technique that works in a more profound and abstract concepts like names and identity, as well as being able to alter the future. So the fight might start with Yhwach not using the Almighty just to play around, but the moment he opens his eyes, Daemon's parlor trick gets negated and there's nothing he can do about it. Coming in last, we have our 2 Quincy brothers, Lloyd Lloyd and Royd Lloyd. Now imagine this. What if Lloyd Lloyd mimic Yhwach and Royd Lloyd mimic him, or if Royd Lloyd mimic Yhwach and Lloyd Lloyd mimic him? Either way, that's Lloyd Lloyd copying Royd Lloyd and Royd Lloyd copying Lloyd Lloyd. But what if Lloyd Lloyd copied Royd Lloyd becoming Yhwach? Would he still be him? What if Lloyd Lloyd copied Royd Lloyd becoming Lloyd Lloyd, or if Royd Lloyd copied Lloyd Lloyd becoming Royd Lloyd? Would they still be them? Lloyd Lloyd can mimic anyone of his choosing, gaining 100% of their fighting capabilities and power. Royd Lloyd can mimic anyone of his choosing, gaining 70 to 80% of their powers, but he also gets in addition their full memories and their mind. So, both of them could turn into anyone on this list and use an argument I've already presented to bypass reflection. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you haven't already, like and subscribe to the channel. 2025, we out.